and then I'll open us in prayer. All right. Welcome. Let's join together in prayer. Lord, we give you thanks for the gift of technology that brings people together across great distances. We give you thanks, Lord, for your word, even when it's confusing, even when it's strange, even when it takes some work to understand, Lord. We know that these are the words that you have promised to use to be present to us. And that's what we ask, Lord, this evening, that you would be present to us through your word in Ecclesiastes. We pray, Lord, all this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
All right. So I told us, I'm on the wrong page in the notes. That is Sunday's sermon. We're not there yet. I told us 2 weeks ago now that we would talk about, it's kind of a dual topic evening. We're going to talk about the righteous and the wicked, and we're going to talk about
Ooh,
death,
witty.
which is fitting for Lent. So that will be our topic for this week. I went and sort of and I'll be honest, I hadn't planned all this out week to week to week. I wasn't quite sure where all this was going to take us. Ecclesiastes being a strange book, given that we're going sort of thematically rather than chapter by chapter and verse by verse. It's not something I do a lot, is thematic Bible study, so I don't have a lot of practice, so to speak. And I just sort of wanted to be open to where the group was leading things. But it feels like we've really sort of gone through the bulk of the content, and there's not a ton more for us to go through. So I took some time to think about what are the next, to look at the calendar for one, and to think about what might be the next topics for us. And I think we will do 2 more weeks after this week on Ecclesiastes. So we will meet again on the next week, which is the 2nd of March. And on, if you're want a head start, the second we will talk about time and we will talk about fear. Um, yeah, I think fear is a good word. Um, and then if there are any other words, ideas, or verses that we have not covered that you want us to cover, we will talk about those next week on the 2nd. So if there's any other holes. And what we will save for the last time that we meet on the 9th, there are 7 of the sort of eat, drink, and be merry, which we haven't really talked about yet. I keep sort of pushing those off to the side. So on the 9th, we will talk about those 7 eat, drink, and be merry moments that occur throughout Ecclesiastes. In other words, we will talk about the only bits of optimism. And and the reason I save those for the end is we're going to have to decide, what do we think? What do we think about those? Having sort of looked at the book as a whole, do we think the author, Kohelet, do we think the writer of Ecclesiastes is trying to offer something really substantial with those 7 optimistic moments? Or is he more saying everything's terrible, this is the best that we can find, but it's not great? Like, how optimistic is he being with those 7 moments? And so I'm going to be looking for your sense of that on the last week. And we will also look at the last 5, 6 verses, chapter 12, verses 9 through 14. And we will sort of round out, any remaining issues, any last questions. That'll be on the 9th. So we'll do the little bit of optimism on the 9th. We'll do the last handful of verses on the 9th. Next week, we will talk about time. So that's which we haven't talked about yet, the really famous, maybe the most famous verses in Ecclesiastes. There is a time for everything under the heavens. We haven't talked about it yet. Turn, turn, turn. There is a season. So we'll talk about time and we'll talk about fear. And we see fear in a couple of places, but
Mhm.
particularly the fear of God. We'll talk about that phrase, fear of God. And and what it might mean and how Ecclesiastes uses it. So that'll be next week. And then this week, righteous, wicked, and death. All right. So that's it. So then we'll if you're curious what's going on with Milford Presbyterian Bible Study after the 9th, we'll be coming into Holy Week. So we will take a few weeks off. I have some vacation time, so I won't be around. We'll have the kind of the week of Palm Sunday, the week of Easter, the week after Easter, I'm on vacation. And the next pastor study will begin. It'll be 2 weeks after Easter. Um, I think that's the third week of April. I could look at a calendar. I don't know yet what we're going to study. I don't know yet what we're going to talk about. It'll probably be because we'll be mid-April at that point. It'll be hybrid. So if you want to join via Zoom, you can be up on the big screen, but the rest of us will be invited to come into the church and we'll be in the Westminster room.
Oh.
So that'll probably be the next study. Um, I'm not sure yet what we'll talk about. It might end up being heresies. I really like talking about the
Oh.
church heresies. I've talked about this a few times, so we might go ahead and talk about church heresies. I think those are really fun. So um, but I haven't decided yet. But that's when it'll be. It'll be kind of that third week of April, and it'll be a hybrid in the Westminster room or on Zoom structure. April, second week of April, first week of, I'm not sure, but there'll be plenty of announcements, plenty of time. But 2 more weeks of Ecclesiastes. All right, I think that's all the housekeeping I have. It always takes longer than I think. When I write these notes out, I'm like, oh, it'll be quick. I'll race through this. It always takes longer. Any questions about either the end of the Ecclesiastes study or anything? Okay. Okay. All right, so let's dive in to this question of the righteous and the wicked. We're going to start there, and it sort of transitions into a conversation about how Kohelet or the teacher views death. They kind of come related. So we're going to be in chapter 8. Chapter 8. Chapter 8 and 9 are the two that really sort of deal, and they kind of naturally segue the one into the other. And we're going to pick up really in verse 10 of chapter 8. The beginning of chapter 8 is this sort of collected proverbs about obeying the king, about obeying the, authorities. Um, I don't have too much to say about it. But anyways, that's what we're skipping over, and then that would be a good short little bit for next week, if you're curious. But we're gonna pick up in verse 10. Uh, so um, I'm trying to decide. We'll save the question. I'll ask my question at the end of this. So we're gonna see in verses 10 and following, sort of what to me now feels like a very classic Ecclesiastes. Uh, Dichotomy, if we want to use a fancy word, um, or dialectic, if you want to go even fancier. If you know your Kantian philosophy, you'll know that dialectic became a very big thing. He's gonna set side by side ideas that don't seem like you can hold them both. You have to pick A or B, and he's just gonna go, nah, both A and B, right? That's what we're going to see here in verse 10 and following of chapter 8. So he's going to talk about what he saw, right? Then too, I saw the wicked buried, those who used to come and go from the holy place and receive praise in the city where they did this. This too is meaningless. It's a little unclear what exactly he's trying to say in these verses. And there's kind of two main options, and they don't. dramatically change the point of what he's trying to say. So he's talking about wicked people. He's talking
Hmm.
about them being buried, right? So they've obviously
Yes.
died. And he's reflecting on the fact that they used to come and go from the holy place. Presumably, that would be Jerusalem. They used to come and go from the holy place and receive praise in the city where they were wicked. So, either what he's saying is
Hmm.
he sees wicked people who were being praised in the very town in which they were wicked, or he's saying he sees wicked people who received praise. Um,
This meeting is being recorded.
uh-oh, in they received praise at their funeral, despite the fact that they were wicked, right? It's one of those two things. At least in the NIV, which is what I was reading from, it seems more, and I'm not, the Hebrew is a little bit vague. The NIV makes it sound like these are wicked people who were wicked in the same town where people were congratulating them for
Right.
being great people, right? That's what it sounds like in the NIV. And I think this is a familiar idea to us. We know we could probably name people who are famous and yet have done awful and terrible things, and yet their fame or their congratulations or their wealth, whatever, it still pours in, despite the fact that they are terrible people. In my generation, there are some artists, some musical artists that are sort of millennial, they had a lot of fame, a lot of music put out when I was in high school, and and yet they're pretty terrible people. Like have gone to prison or, had court cases over being terrible people. And there's a lot of us millennials who, like, we don't listen to them anymore. We don't want to have anything to do with their music. We don't want to associate with them. Um, and yet there are other millennials who, because of the nostalgia or because of whatever, continue to go to the concerts and buy the albums. And we're like, what are you doing? Like there's a sort of infighting, right, over these artists. I'm sure there's similar things for all of our generations, whether it's musicians or politicians or actors, right? There are wicked people who you know they're wicked. We all know they're wicked. And yet the hevel, the smoke, the difficult thing to understand or grasp is they continue to show up in the popular imagination. They get their star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. They get interviewed on, the late shows or on whatever. And you're like, we know they're awful people. How do they continue to show up in these places, right? That's what he's saying. And I think that there's a familiarity to that phrase. Um, so that's one thing he sees with the wicked. That's in verse 10. He has this note in verse 11. When the sentence for a crime is not quickly carried out, the hearts of the people are filled with schemes to do wrong. Right? There's a principle in justice, in ethics, that is that you have to be swift, you have to be quick, you have to be efficient with offering justice for something. If you delay justice, that is actually an injustice. In part, you can think in the American system. I'm not a lawyer, but there's at least one of them on the video call who can correct me. There are statutes of limitations, right? Certain crimes you only have a certain amount of time before you can bring them before bring the charges to this person, right? We recognize that there needs to be a certain amount of temporal efficiency or quickness to certain crimes. Other crimes are so bad that there is no statute of limitations. At any point, you can bring charges related to certain things. But the best justice is quick justice, right? This is something that we, I think, at least in modern ethics, are familiar with. And here we see it in Ecclesiastes. He's saying there has to be some relationship between the speed at which a crime is adjudicated uh, and the justice of that process. We can't just wait forever and ever. Now, what's strange about verse 11 is he doesn't really follow it up with like the opposite, but we can imagine the sort of subtext here is sometimes it takes a long time. Sometimes it takes a long time to bring somebody to justice, right? And we know that that would also be Hevel. It's why? Why is it that sometimes it seems so difficult to hold somebody accountable for what they've done wrong?
Mm.
Verse 12, although a wicked man commits 100 crimes and lives a long time, again, we know that this is the case. There are some people who manage to go their whole, huge careers of being awful and evil. He says, I see that this happens, and yet he says, I know that it will go better with God-fearing men who are reverent before God. Yet because the wicked do not fear God, it will not go well with them, and their days will not lengthen like a shadow. So here we have really the primary sort of um, dialectical, the primary dichotomy that he identifies. Uh, you've got on the one hand, some wicked people manage to go a long time, years and years and years of being wicked. And yet, he says, the wicked, it will not go for them. It will not go well for them. Their days will not lengthen. In other words, God's justice will show up for wicked people. And he's saying both of these things are true. Now, both of these things seem contradictory. How is that the case? How is it that wicked people can go a long, long time with their wickedness, and yet wicked people their days will not lengthen like a shadow? How is both of these things true at the same time? And really, Kohelet is just saying, well, look around. It is both of these things are true. And if we think about it for a second, we can go, yeah, both of these things absolutely are true. We know that there are people who manage to escape for whatever reason for years and years and years with their terrible crimes. We know that there is such a thing as that kind of wickedness. But we also know, like, I don't want to out my brother, mom, right now, but he could not get away with anything, big or small, to save his life. The poor guy, he got caught every single time. It never worked out for him, whether big or small. He always seemed to get caught. And of course, from my mom, she's told this story before. From my mom's perspective, that was God's gift to the family, right? Was that Calvin always got caught. He never got away with it. It always sort of got brought to the light and got dealt with and got addressed. He couldn't get away with anything. And we sort of, as parents and children, we want to know when they've done something wrong. We want to catch them. Why? Because if they manage to go a long time without getting caught, and this might be the connection back to verse 11, it's going to make them more likely to do wrong things. They think, oh, I got away with it last time. I'm going to get away with it this time. My poor brother, of course, it just took him longer than expected to realize he couldn't get away with stuff. So maybe he should stop, right? It just took him a couple extra years. He got there, thank the Lord. But we know that both of these categories exist. We know there are people who they do wicked. I mean, their rap sheets are super long, right? Like they're constantly getting caught, and you just think, how do you not realize? How do you not realize that it is better for you to stop breaking the law you don't seem to be very good at it, right? And yet, we also know there are people who manage to live luxurious and comfortable lives on the basis of all that they have done wrong, right? And they make a lot of money and they live really luxuriously. Wickedness, and we could, sort of by contrast say righteousness, wickedness is not a guarantee of having a worse life in the view of Ecclesiastes. And so we could say what about the opposite? Righteousness is not a guarantee for having a good life. Just as there are wicked who might get away for a long time with their crimes, the righteous might suffer unjustly for a long time, even though they are righteous. And that's exactly where Ecclesiastes goes in verse 14. There is something else, hevel, smoky, vaporious, mysterious, something that's difficult to understand that occurs on earth. Righteous men who get what the wicked deserve, and wicked men who get what the righteous deserve. This too, I say, is hevel, mysterious, smoky, vanity, meaningless. Um, the first thing that this brings to mind, for me at least, is I don't know if any of you are familiar with the book, The New Jim Crow. The New
Hmm.
Jim Crow. It's maybe 10 years old at this point, something like that. Um,
Called James.
what was that?
It's called, the name of it is James.
No, no, no. The book
Hmm.
is called The New Jim Crow. It's I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the book James, the new
Okay.
yeah.
Glad you got me.
Yes, I did. The New Jim Crow by Alexandria. I have it over my bookshelf. I could go look. This is I think she was a district attorney, or maybe she just worked for the DA's office. I can't remember exactly. She's a lawyer.
Mm.
She's also happens to be a woman of color. And she went into law. She went in onto the prosecutor's side of things, was really, we might say bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, really felt like the justice system was. And so she narrates this early in the book. People were sort of challenging her that, hey, the American judicial system isn't all that it's cracked up to be on closer examination. There are some flaws. There are some failures.
Mm.
And she sort of dove into, well, I don't know, I think it's pretty good, and sort of dove into researching and looking into it. And there are ways, and her book is really focused on the ways in which the American judicial system uh, levies a heavier penalty often on people of color than on white people. She's trying to make the argument in that book, at least, and I'm not enough of a scholar to repudiate it one way or the other. It is a pretty compelling argument that in the American South, there was an intention. Her point is that there was an intentional effort by lawmakers in the American South at the end of the Jim Crow era to inscribe into the judicial system punishments that were heavier on people of color than they were on white people. So the sort of classic example, whether or not her whole argument stands, the point is she's exposing some of the injustice in the justice system. One sort of very classic example is something called mandatory minimums, which is when somebody is found guilty of a certain kind of case, there is a limit on the discretion of the court system as to the punishment for that crime. There is a mandatory minimum. You cannot give them less than X amount of, whether it's jail, whatever, fines, whatever. There's a mandatory minimum. And one of the sort of early examples that Michelle, I think is her name, Michelle, I'll look it up. And it's a classic example of the case, but crack cocaine and uh, cocaine, the powdered form, I guess, they're chemically identical and the high is identical. But crack
Mm.
cocaine, this is all from the book. I'm not saying this like as though I know. What a crack cocaine and powder cocaine are chemically identical. The high is identical, but crack cocaine tends to be less sort of pure and this is all changed now with fentanyl and opioids, but back when these laws were being written, was more available for poor folks, and powdered cocaine was purer and was more readily available for wealthier folks. And so you also saw that more black people smoked crack cocaine and more white people snorted the powdered version of cocaine. And we can think of like, Wolf of Wall Street, 80s, white
Mm.
collar businessmen who used cocaine recreationally, and then, black folks in the South who use crack cocaine, uh, identical drug, different formulation, different way of consuming it, but same plant, same everything. Other than that, the mandatory minimums were like incredibly different for these two
Mm.
drugs, right? White collar crime is often under what is it? Employers who steal from their employees in terms of like not paying for overtime, hundreds of times greater than employees stealing from employers, and yet who tends to go to jail for stealing for theft, right? It's rarely do you see employers going to jail. You tend to see the employees going. There's all these places in the American judicial system, as good as it is, as great as it is, certainly no suggestion for me to do anything else. It's not perfect, right? In our own country, in our own system, it's not perfect. If Kohelet were writing today, he would have a whole chapter on the American judicial system and the inequalities. We all know lawyers are expensive, right? Guess who gets the best lawyers? People with the most money. Guess who doesn't get the best lawyers? People with the least amount of money. Guess who spend more time in, right? We can sort of begin to name all these ways. This is hevel. This is meaningless. This is hard to grasp. If the however many of us, 20 of us on this Zoom call sat down to try and come up with a better judicial system, I'm not sure we could, but we could certainly name the frustrating, impossible problems with the one that exists, right? It's Hevel. It's Hevel. Is it then better to be righteous than wicked? If it's all Hevel, is it really better to be righteous than wicked? This is sort of the, I don't know, implicit question that comes out of these verses from chapter 8. And what one way that I think, I mean, most of us would say, well, we want to be righteous because at least we ought to be righteous. At least we can feel good about ourselves, uh, given whatever may occur. But there's another form of this question that um, I distinctly remember. I was at First Baptist Church of Hillsborough in North Carolina, and I was a grad student, and I was in this Bible study, or Sunday school class, and the question came up, and I'd be curious to hear how this question lands for all of you. Um, so this is a more specific form of that general question, why should I even be righteous? Why be righteous if sometimes you're better off being wicked in a certain sense? The more specific form is, does being a Christian, does being a Christian mean that life will necessarily be better in the sense of, um, are you more likely to get a raise if you have Christian values than if you don't? Are you more likely to be successful in your job if you have Christian values than if you don't have Christian values. Does being a Christian mean life will go better or not necessarily? Does that question, see what I'm driving at with the question? All right. You can have your first reaction thought, or you can offer a third reaction, third reaction thought. But how does that question land for you?
I think it depends
Mm,
because I had many years in the corporate world and I saw good people be successful sometimes, but I saw plenty who climbed the ladder
yeah.
based on thumping people and doing very, very unethical things. So, yeah, I think it works both ways.
Yeah.
But I feel like it was always important at the end of the day to go home and look in the mirror and say I did the right thing.
Right. Right.
You know what? That's what mattered.
Yeah. Yeah. Anybody else?
Well, outside of work, I don't think being a Christian, you, some of these people have a lot of sorrow in their lives, a lot of loss or
Mm,
illness, or, there's it just, they live in a good life, they're being good Christians, but they're dealt a hard hand
yeah. Yeah.
in this world. Yeah,
Yeah. It doesn't protect you from hardship necessarily.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
think being a Christian helps you overcome the hardships easier than non-Christians. I don't think it helps you be more successful. I think, being successful just comes from your own inner strength, your drive, what motivates you, you know, being in the right place at the right time. But when you run into the obstacles,
Mm,
you go to the Lord with prayer, and it's like, it's a little easier to overcome those obstacles and get where you need to be.
yeah.
But I don't think being a Christian necessarily gets you there.
Yeah. Yeah.
My first thought was we weren't promised happiness or success or anything like
Yeah.
that as a Christian.
Yeah.
I'm gonna play devil's advocate.
Good.
Uh,
People, people who hide behind Christianity,
oh,
who act out, thou art, I'm better than, this and da 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 da. But when you really see the other side of them, makes you think twice.
Yeah.
Like they hide behind, they hide behind the church doors. They hide behind a lot of things, and yet mm, they're not. So sometimes you wonder if being a Christian, how do we put this? If being a Christian, I mean, if you have hell happen to you within the church,
Yeah.
is is it worth being a Christian?
Oh. Yeah.
That's my thought. Take it or leave it.
What was really fascinating to me when this came up, and I can't tell you what scripture we were talking about. I could not for the life of me communicate. Maybe it's because I was 22 and nobody believed me because I was 22, but I could not convince this room of Baptists that just because you were a Christian, they were really convinced that being a Christian meant you were more likely to get that raise, you were more likely to get that promotion, you were more likely to. They thought being a Christian, and therefore, if you were more honest, um, if you tried to lie your way to the top, those lies were going to get found out. But if you were honest all the way through, that honesty would come through at the end. That you're, right? You can see sort of how that they really firmly, deeply believed that being a Christian always meant that you would sort of come out ahead. And I just remember I remember trying to lead them into another vision of what it might be for mean for being a Christian, and they really couldn't see it. And reading this, I thought, oh, this is what I should have done. I should have taken them to Ecclesiastes and shaken them and said, look, it's all hevel. It's all hevel. You just don't know, right? That's the thing. Regardless of setting aside that question of how can you sleep at night, and setting aside the question, which is going to come up in just a few verses, of how God views you. If you look at it under the sun, so to speak, right? It is not a guarantee. Being righteous, being Christian is not a guarantee of promotion, of success, of happiness. It's no guarantee that your family will be family life will be easy, safe. All of these things. There's still a great deal for what Ecclesiastes says. Time and chance happen to them all. Um, we would just say these are not the things that God has promised. For all that God has promised, there's a lot that God has not promised. And Ecclesiastes is really showing us that righteousness is not one of those things that has a guaranteed outcome. And I think this is really, you know, I don't know. I think it's really important. I've certainly preached on this recently. It's something I think about a lot, but we know that at different moments in history, being a Christian, and it's in different moments and in different places, because it's still happening in this moment in history. It just isn't happening so much in the United States. But being a Christian meant suffering, right? Those two things went hand in hand. If you confess Christ as Lord, that might put you in a place of being persecuted, right? This happens currently in China. This happened, in the Greco-Roman world. This happened all throughout in the Middle East, starting,
Currently in Africa.
yeah, in the 700s. It's just not the case that being faithful to God, being righteous as God sees you being righteous, is any sort of guarantee. And uh, yeah, yeah. And I think that's what Ecclesiastes is pulling up here. Um, there's a real sorrow when we think about justice sometimes, or wickedness sometimes. And I think too about how do we teach kids, right? Like, obviously when kids are a certain age, you want to tell them like being good gets you more, right? Because when they're little, that's about the level that they can understand. But at a certain point, you have to start to teach them being good is good, even if it doesn't get you more, right? Um, I think the Canadian curler who had that little, the finger that pushed that curling stone, right? That the whole, world sort of exploded about for 3 or 4 days. Like, you know, being um being an honest competitor is its own reward, but it also might come in handy if you end up on the biggest stage in the world. Keeps you from looking like a fool in front of everybody. It might actually help, but it also might not. It also might not. All right, so that's a little bit of chapter 8 where we're talking about righteousness and wickedness, and we see the heaviness, right? We're starting to like, oh yeah, okay, I get it. I see the heaviness. I see the so then we're gonna look at we're gonna continue on. We've got one of those eat and drink in verse 15. I commend the enjoyment of life because nothing is better for a man under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad. We'll talk about that on the last day. Uh, and then we'll skip past that down to chapter 9. So he's reflecting on all this stuff and concludes that the righteous and the wise and what they do are in God's hands. And this is going to be a really surprising thing that he says. But no man knows whether love or hate awaits him. So now he's talking about death, right? He's talking about on the other side of the grave. And he's saying, um, there is an uncertainty, whether you've been righteous or wicked, about what comes next for you, right? On the other side of death. This is totally, we talked a little bit about this with how I think this was last time we met, how he sort of takes the wisdom of Proverbs and like shakes it on his head. Now he's going a little further. He's all through the rest of the Old Testament. You look at the Psalms, you look at the Proverbs, you look at, I don't know, First Samuel, you look at Genesis, and if you look anywhere else in the Old Testament, those who are righteous have a confidence before the Lord when they die that the unrighteous don't have.
Mm.
If you've been righteous, if you've been a part of God's family, if you've been, a faithful Jew, Israelite, Hebrew, you shouldn't die with anything but confidence. And yet here he's saying, no one knows whether love or hate awaits the righteous or the wicked. What? This is a really surprising thing for us to find. And then he goes on, verse 2, all share a common destiny, which again is like, well, you just said love or hate, but now you're saying it's a common destiny. He says, the righteous and the wicked, the good and the bad, the clean and the unclean, those who offer sacrifices and those who don't. As it is with the good man, so it is with the sinner. As it is with those who take oaths, so it is with those who are afraid to take them. And I think the point that he's saying here, well, he says it. This is the evil in everything that happens under the sun. The same destiny overtakes them all.
It's not that easy.
He's just saying, you're dead.
Because I keep,
You're
I mean, I'm
dead.
supposed to be out there,
One way or the other, you are dead.
but I don't see anything where, I mean, I'm thinking it's already out there, to be honest, for me. But
Uh-oh.
how do I know?
Mm.
I don't even find it,
Who's
you
Ch-
know?
I can't find who it is.
Yes,
It
yeah,
doesn't-
it's on the paper.
It's me,
Uh, oh, there. I got you, Susan. Okay. This is the evil that happens in everything under the sun. The same destiny overtakes them all. The hearts of men are full of evil, he says. There's madness in their hearts where they live, and afterward they join the dead. Anyone who is among the living has hope. Even a live dog is better off than a dead lion. So and this comes back maybe to our conversation about riches. Um, there's a limit. There's a limit. And he's now pointing to the ultimate limit, which is death. And we're all going to reach that limit. And he's really pushing on this view that that is a kind of leveling. Everybody is the same, righteous or wicked, clean or unclean, those who sacrifice, those who didn't sacrifice, the sinner, the good man, those who take oaths, those who are afraid to take oaths, all dead. They're all dead. They're all at the same level place. Now, is a caveat here that we should keep in mind, and maybe you've already had this thought. Um, the Old Testament, maybe I mentioned this, I don't think I have in this class, but the Old Testament has one place that all the dead go in the Old Testament imagination. It's called Sheol, Sheol, Sheol. It just means the place of the dead. It's not heaven or hell. It's just where all of the dead are together. It's described, I remember some Old Testament professor, he said it's gray, like the color. It's just gray.
Mm.
It's not good nor bad. It's not black nor white. It's just meh. Meh. Everybody's in the same meh. And that's really what Ecclesiastes is thinking through. Like, if everything is the same for everybody, what's the point of any of it? And he concedes it's better to be a live dog than a dead lion. In other words, you'd rather be alive than dead, right? You'd rather be alive than dead. But when you're alive, guess what? You know that you're going to die. That's verse 5. The dead, they don't even have to worry about that. right? So he's like, well, it's better to be alive than dead, but at least the dead don't have to worry about dying, right? He says they have no further reward, and even the memory of them is forgotten. Their love, their hate, their jealousy have long since vanished. Never again will they have a part in anything that happens under the sun. And then he has another one of those, go eat and drink. All right, guys, go eat and drink and be merry.
Right.
Now I've told you all about how the dead are better off because they don't have to die. Like, seriously, dude? He goes on, and then the sort of crux of this, verse 11 and 12, the race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, right? These are more Hevel things, right? Fastest person doesn't always win. We've seen the clips, speed skating, someone falls down, and the Australian who has no business being there wins the race, right? It's not the fastest guy, it's just a guy who stayed upright the longest. The battle doesn't go to the strong. The Brits would feel this way about the American Revolutionary War. There's no reason for the Americans to win. The only reason we won is that we didn't stand in straight lines and shoot and play in a gentlemanly way. We hid behind rocks and trees and we took advantage of their, lining up like little toy soldiers. We weren't the strongest. Nor does food come to the wise, wealth to the brilliant, favor to the learned, and this time and chance happen to them all. He's like, it just, and then the final punch, no man knows when his hour will come. A fish, as fish are caught in a cruel net, or birds are taken in a snare, so men are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them. Right? He's like, man, this is the ultimate hevel of the whole thing, is death. It just doesn't make sense to him. He can't, for all the wisdom, for all the learning, for all the study, for all the investigation, for all of his effort, he cannot make sense of death. Right?
Do you think he would have made sense of it if he had lived through Jesus' time?
Getting ahead of us.
Oh,
But that's the good, that's right, like that's an important caveat or a big asterisk over all of Ecclesiastes. And this will be part of what we talk about. I didn't write it down. On the last day is that phrase under the sun. We'll have to talk about what that means. That's a key phrase in the book of Ecclesiastes, under the sun. And that will affect how we think about the whole book. What does he mean under the sun? Um, there's nothing in the worldview of Ecclesiastes, there's nothing that proves his point more, I think, than death. Right? That is his trump card. That's his gotcha. For anything that we might want to offer a retort, whether it's about wisdom, health, work, righteousness, anything else, his trump card is death. And I think what he's saying about no one knows whether love or hate awaits the righteous or the wicked. I think his point is the only people who know are the dead, and they're not talking, right? You and I, we have belief, but we don't have knowledge. We don't know. We can trust, we can have faith, but we don't know. It is this ultimate enigma, mystery, question mark that is like a snare or a trap. We don't know it ahead of time. We can't anticipate it. It's this huge, it's the ultimate hevel. There's nothing more smoky and mysterious. And he's saying, what are we to, how can you deny my thesis that life is hevel in the face of death? This is the thing. This is the thing. And then he puts, this is verse 12 and chapter 12. This is sort of his poetic conclusion of the book. He chooses to end really with death. Um, Chapter 12, remember your creator in the days of your youth. So he's going to begin with children or with youth. He says, before the days of trouble come, that's how he describes what it means to be alive, days of trouble. That's all they are. It's just days of trouble.
Mhm.
And the years
Interesting.
approach when you will say, I find no pleasure in them. He says, before the sun and the light and the moon and the stars grow dark and the clouds return after the rain, it's already rained. Why are there more clouds? Right? Life in the Pacific Northwest, it's just another rainy day. Just another rainy day. When the keepers of the house tremble and the strong men stoop, right? That is their strength is sort of starting to give out, right? They're starting to stoop. The grinders cease because they are few. Those looking through the windows grow dim. The doors to the street are closed. So what he's painting is a picture of sort of getting older, and he's sort of imagining like this village closing down as an analogy for getting older. The doors to the street are closed. The sound of the grinding fades. The men rise up at the sounds of birds. You could maybe think of the morning when the birds are chirping. And he says, but now all their songs grow faint. Um, Really strange phrase. The Hebrew's a little unclear. Men are afraid of heights and of dangers in the streets. Um, I'm gonna have to look. I don't remember it now, but I found a better description in my Hebrew scholar has a better translation of that, but I don't have it in front of me. And then this interesting, the almond tree blossoms and the grasshopper drags himself along and desire no longer is stirred. It's another weird translation thing. But again, it's an image of getting older. Then man goes to his eternal home. That would be death. And mourners go about in the street, right? So the village now has come out to mourn the one who has died. Remember him. And now it's going to be a series of images of sort of the end of life. Before the silver cord is severed, or the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the spring, or the wheel broken at the well. And then the ultimate picture of death. And the dust returns to the ground it came from, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. Meaning, vanity, hevel, says the teacher. Everything is hevel. And that's how the sort of the teacher's section of Ecclesiastes that starts a little bit through chapter 1, it's chapter 1, verse 2. He opens with hevel, hevel, says the teacher, utterly hevel, everything is hevel. And now he's closing it, chapter 8, hevel, hevel, says the teacher, everything is hevel. And then we're gonna get this postscript, verses 9 through following, and that's what we'll talk about on the last week. So he closes the teacher's section of Ecclesiastes closes with this image, this poetic description of the end of life, right? And the dust, and giving out the dust returns from whence it came, and the spirit returns to the God who gave it. There's nothing more hevel. There's nothing smokier, more vaporous, more enigmatic, more mysterious than death, right? Um,
I have a question.
yes, ma'am.
So
Oh, you muted yourself.
a lot of the rich got buried in the tombs. So
Mhm.
where did the poor people go?
I mean, just
Did they burn them?
no, they called them potter's fields. Well, so far as I
Okay.
know, big open graves, or mass graves,
Okay.
but I don't, I don't know for sure. You're talking about in Hebrew. I think for Israel, they were very careful with their dead bodies. they were very they had a lot of rules and rituals around it. People who touched a dead body, you were unclean for 7 days. You had to go through a purification process. The body had to go into ground before the Sabbath. Once it was the Sabbath, you couldn't touch anymore, right? This is a big thing for Good Friday. Why did they have to get Jesus into the tomb so quickly? You had real strict rules for burial in the Jewish world, um, but they weren't precious, I think, generally precious about dead bodies.
Well, just because when he says about the ashes,
The dust returns to the ground it came from.
yeah, the dust returns to the ground it came from. So that's
I mean,
I just didn't know.
yeah, and he's a little more than talking about specific burial rites. He's referencing Genesis chapter 2. God formed Adam from the dust of the earth and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, right?
Right.
Saying the dust is going back to the earth, and the breath, spirit being the same word as breath, the breath is going back to God, right? It's an
Do you
undoing of
do
Genesis.
you so he knew about the book of Genesis
Yeah.
and all the other
Oh yeah.
books
Oh yeah.
writing this.
Oh yeah. Definitely.
Okay.
Definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. Definitely.
All right.
I think so.
Interesting.
Lent. And I like that we're reading this during Lent. Lent is this great season where where as Presbyterians, we're big on confession. Historically, we're a bit too big on confession historically. We're, I think, in a more reasonable place now. Where we're just trying to be on. Confession is a way to just be honest, to set aside pretense. It's very easy on a Sunday morning. We're dressed in our Sunday best. It's very easy um, to be sitting there in the pews, hoping that nobody overheard the fight that you had in the car right before you came out of the parking lot, yelling at your kids about their behavior. You're like, please God, don't let anybody have heard how whatever, right? It's that image where we get to church and we're like, we're all on our best behavior, and confession is a moment to just say, we know that we're not this all the time. We snap at people. We have whatever our thing is. We all have our things, and we're going to take this moment and just knowing that God is with us, we're just going to be honest to God about those things. And I think the church, that happens on a Sunday morning. That pressure to be perfect happens on a Sunday morning. That pressure happens in the church more broadly to really present to the world, not just each other, but to the world, as though being a Christian means we've got all the answers. We've got all the solutions. We've got it all together. If you've got a worry, we've got, some hope for you. And much as I believe that Christianity and Jesus, right, not the faith generically, but Jesus, the person, has what it is that we need to live good lives, it is also the case that there are many things that are hevel, right? And sometimes the church makes it seem like we know more than we do. And the phrase that I have written at the end of my notes after thinking about how Ecclesiastes talks about death is I wrote, head out of the sand and be honest. Take your head out of the sand and be honest. Just be honest. Be honest about those things that we as people of faith worry about, wonder about, and don't know. Just be honest. If you can't even be honest with other Christians, how can you expect to be honest with the world? And if you can't be honest with the world, how can you expect them to have any interest in what it is that you have to say to them? Head out of the sand and just be honest. There are some really hard, confusing, upsetting parts of life that Christianity, as much as Jesus walks with us, we are still in the valley. We're still in the shadows. We don't actually know what's going on. We have a hope, but it is just hope. And I think as Ecclesiastes talks about, you know, before the silver cord is severed or the golden bowl is broken, before the pitcher is shattered at the well, like just be honest. Don't don't expect our faith to gild, right? That just a golden veneer over all of life. There is some hardship, there is confusion, there is doubt. Be honest. Be okay with being honest. Um, God prefers God prefers that from us. Any other thoughts about righteousness and wickedness and death from Ecclesiastes? Obviously, to my mom's point, this will come up on the last class. Ecclesiastes is working from this particular point of view under the sun. And we're going to have to decide what difference do we think Jesus makes to how we read Ecclesiastes? It's a good question to ask, but for now, we want to sort of sit within the point of view of Ecclesiastes. Any other comments, thoughts, reflection? Not optimistic. He's not optimistic.
I never heard before that that in the Old Testament, that's how they looked at death, and
Yeah.
that's
Yeah,
that
yeah.
everything was the same. And so that I feel like that helps me put what he's saying in perspective
Yep.
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, and also when you read the Psalms, that perspective will help. You'll notice there's a lot of times where the psalmist is telling God, like if you don't give the wicked what they deserve now, they're never going to get what they deserve. That's because there was no sense of justice after death. It was just everybody went to the same place. Or there's a psalm where it says, there's a couple of them where it says, God, if I die, I can't praise you, right? His point is, you know, when you're dead, you're no longer in the presence of God. That was the whole Old Testament idea of God. So what the psalmist is trying to negotiate with God, saying, hey, if
Let me
it's
live.
time, I'll keep praising you. Right. That's why those verses are in there. So yeah.
That's right.
Did the Jewish people, I mean, they believe there's like a middle. You're in this one area of holding for so many days before you move on.
Yeah.
Was it the same way? Was it the same then
No,
as that?
so there's um the view of life after death changes throughout. Israel was Israel for 4,000 years.
Right.
God did not tell them everything on day one. So the view of life after death changes between the Old Testament and even Jesus's time. So I don't know offhand exactly how, like, if you were to ask the rabbi at, one of the local, I don't know what they would say about life after death. I know what the Old Testament thinks.
Okay.
Wow.
That would be something worth knowing.
Thanks, Mom.
All right.
Read another book, Darren. Come on.
Well, maybe I'll try to figure that out.
There you go. You learn it and tell me this time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Read another book, Jan.
Anything else? All right. Yeah, go ahead, Dean.
I was going to say real quick, what I think is fascinating is how much the Ecclesiastes still applies to today. It just seems so relevant in so many ways. Like you mentioned, justice delayed is justice denied.
Yeah.
And about the, life and death and how we don't know what it means and, we can ponder it and all. It's really a curiosity that a couple thousand years ago, somebody wrote this with so much insight about what we're experiencing right now and what life is like for us right now. Now, some of it does seem kind of dark in a way. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of like Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon album or something, but it's fascinating that it's so relevant right now to me.
Yeah, yeah, and honestly, and the kind of irony of it is, it almost proves Ecclesiastes' point when he says things like, "We'll talk about this next week with time," but he's like, "Things don't change, right? The more
Right.
things change, the
Not
more they
really.
stay the same.
Right.
Just more from the time of Ecclesiastes even to now. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, even that saying that we say, only the good die young,
right.
I
Yeah,
mean,
all these things.
people have thought that forever. What
Yep,
what good does it get you?
yep.
Maybe I should have lied and cheated my way to the top and
Or
How
you've
many times do we
yeah.
think that?
Yeah, you've got the lady that, she's 103 and she smokes every day and drinks strong port,
Right.
and you're like, man, maybe I should smoke every day and drink strong port. Uh, all right. Well, next week we will talk
Please.
about time. We will talk about fear, and then if there's any other than eat, drink, and be glad in the last couple of verses, and that idea of under the sun. Those three things we'll talk about on the last week. Next week, if there's anything else that you're like, hey, this is a verse I want to talk about, this is a whatever, bring that next week. We'll talk about time and fear, and then any other little things that we missed. We'll try and catch it all next week, and then we'll wrap up on the 9th. All right, sound good?
Okay.
All right, go with grace.